absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's All-Star Wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once, if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Hello, everybody. Hi. See, I'm making myself small. You know why? Because we've got this guy and we've got this guy. Oh, there. I'm going to make you guys bigger.
Wow.
You guys are the stars.
Holy moly.
I would have to say that smaller is better for the viewers at home, but that's just me.
You're right. It is just you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disagreeing.
Well, this is Joe Chupik, Polish Joe. That is Mick Karch. He is Slick Mick. I am Chris Tubbs. I am Tubbsy. That's because I put that in the description. And we are live on tape, and we are here to talk about what?
Live on tape.
Live on tape. Isn't that what you guys say in the business?
That's what they say. That's what they say at the start of Stephen Colbert show every night. Live on tape.
It just kills me when somebody grabs their phone. Hey, I'm filming you. Where is the film?
Live on tape.
I just chuckle at that every time.
That's what the cool kids are saying. I mean, that's the word on the street.
We're far from kids and we're far from cool.
And we're far from cred. Word. Okay, so welcome into AWA Unleashed, preeminent #1 podcast. We got a lot of bullshit. We got a lot of wrestling. If you guys are new here, welcome. We appreciate you. Oh my God.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Now I went dark. Hold on a second.
You know what? Let's just start this over again. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're gonna restart this. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. Coming down in 3, 2. Hey, welcome in to AWA Unleashed, preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to the American Wrestling Association. There, much better.
What a way to kill 3 minutes.
Well, hey, we got to kill an hour sometime.
Yeah, we got 57 more, pal.
True. Very
you want
true.
me to go through the intro again?
No.
Okay.
Let's get to the shtick.
Yeah, this is the shtick. No, we're happy to have you guys here, though. And in all seriousness, we love talking about the AWA. If you're new, welcome, and if you have been following us, thank you as well. We do want to tell you guys, first of all, about our pinfall membership. We were talking about some things. We got some brand new things that we're rolling out very, very quickly. The brainchild of Joe Chupik. I really love the ideas that he's kind of thrown at us. $4.99 a month, you guys. You get access to this a day early, which is usually a Monday. You get our exclusive monthly video, updated commentary, Mystery Science Theater 3000 meets professional wrestling. You're going to see that very, very soon. You're going to see a brand new way that it's going to pop, and you are going to love it. You get the Back to Ringside with Milk and myself, where we're going to talk about everything that's going on in the wrestling business today. You get a thank you letter from myself with a magnet and a sticker, and you get 5 photos from Slick Mick's Picks. So we've got all of that. We want to thank you guys for that. We've also got our TeePublic, where you can get your Slick Mick merchandise. You can get AWA Unleashed merchandise. We got a whole bunch of different swag. Yeah. Well, see,
these aren't available anymore.
That's done. Like, that's the personalized hoodies with your name on it. Those are done. Joe's got a retro that is not available any longer. That was a very, maybe we'll roll out something like that in the future. But there we go. Okay, all the shtick aside, all the fun aside, we're going to have fun in a different way, you guys, because we're going back to 1964 for our year in review. And this is great for someone like me, because I see, when the AWA was created, and then we got 62, I think 65 and 67 or so. But it seems like every year you've got a lot of talent, but there's also just enough changes with people coming in and kind of things. So it's kind of the same, but it's not as well, because every year, especially in the infancy, they've all got their very unique part of what made the AWA special.
Very, very well said. And I would be remiss, Chris, as long as we're talking about history in the AWA. Got to acknowledge something. Last week, we put up some photographs, and there was a question about Reggie Parks being the Avenger, in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, Reggie Parks was an Avenger, a masked man, but not in the Omaha territory. That was Art Nielsen. And I was corrected. I was corrected via messenger by one George P. Shire. And George started out by saying, Mick, 3 Micks for emphasis. He wanted me to know that it was not Reggie Parks. It was the Avenger in Omaha. It was Art Nielsen. And, I kid George Shire a lot, but you know what, George, I don't give a shit. But I appreciate the correction.
Wow. I appreciate it, but I don't give it. That's like conflicting information.
No, it isn't. Not when it comes to Shire.
Yeah, you gotta remember and understand the relationship that the two of them have.
That's correct.
It's like an odd couple relationship.
Sort of.
The oddest couple relationship.
Yeah, and he is definitely Felix. There's no question.
Yeah. Do you think that I should make like a new design, Mick, and then just George Shire?
No.
No? Oh, come on. We can split the royalties. I think George would love that.
That's what I mean. No.
What are you going to do with the nickel?
Right.
Hey, right. George, man, I tried, brother. I tried. I tried to create it. I thought it would have been good for me personally. Would have been good. I can do that when I have free time, which baseball season coming up. So
let's go to 1964.
Let's get into 1964. Yes, and I will I'll let you take it away here, and I'll start working on some pictures.
All right, Mick. So tell me, where does 1964 rank in the terms of importance in AWA history?
I wouldn't say it was one of the most important years, although there were some important title changes. As I looked over and scanned the roster in 1964, there were not a lot of guys coming in and out of the territory. There was a pretty regular roster of guys that made the schedule. As I said, a couple of championship changes. It was a good year. It was a fun year. As were the early years in the 1960s, the fledgling years of the AWA. But some fun stuff went on with a lot of great personalities. So let's do it, Joe.
Well, just a quick question. So 1964, the AWA was, 4 years old?
Yes.
Now, travel back in the 1960s is certainly different than it is today. In the 80s, the talent mainly moved into Minneapolis, into Minnesota to work the territory. Was the talent mostly Minnesota people? Did they, were there a couple of guys that they would fly in, or was it mandated that they had to live here in order to run the towns?
As far as I know, it was not mandated. But a lot of the guys did live here. And, I look up at those old addresses, and some of them lived in downtown Minneapolis. Some of them lived in the uptown Minneapolis area, so the topography has certainly changed here. And it was a little bit smaller territory than the AWA was going to expand to. I know this is one of your questions, Joe, but they had not gone into some of the cities that they eventually would thrive in. That was a couple of years down the road. So it was Minneapolis, St. Paul, of course. Davenport, Iowa would run shows once in a while. Moline, Illinois, Winnipeg, Omaha, and Denver. I think that was primarily your AWA circuit, so to speak. As I looked again at the results from 1964 AWA, heavy in Winnipeg, heavy in Denver, heavy in Omaha, and actually some surrounding towns in Nebraska. But the AWA had not expanded to the San Franciscos, to the Oaklands, to, wherever. That was still to come. But still, when you hear some of the names, they had one hell of a roster in 64.
So, and I may have not heard, but it didn't sound like you included anything in Wisconsin at that point.
Oh, I should. Milwaukee, okay.
Okay.
Of course, Milwaukee was there. I don't believe they expanded into Green Bay for a handful of years yet. But I
And how about Chicago?
Chicago, they were there, but it really wasn't an AWA territory. You got to remember, in 1961, one of the most important wrestling matches of all time, Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers, was at Comiskey Park in Chicago, and that was an NWA heavyweight championship. So things were still on the horizon for the AWA, but still we got some good stuff, and I love looking at the names and the memories.
Well, let's do that. Let's start off with the champions, the singles champions of the AWA in 1964.
Okay, there were a couple of them. This guy right here, you may recognize him. And again, I love that belt, that old AWA World Champion Wrestler. That was the simplicity of the belt. It didn't spin. That is Vern Gagne, of course, who was the champion coming into 1964. It gets a little intriguing because, Joe, I mentioned Omaha did their own thing a lot of times. And the next guy that we're going to put up on the screen actually defeated Vern Gagne in Omaha for a 2-week title run. I don't remember that being acknowledged here in the Twin Cities, so I'm guessing that it was just let's leave it right here in Omaha and not tell anybody about it. Mad Dog Vachon defeated Vern Gagne, and then of course Vern regained the title. We didn't know he ever lost it, but then officially in October of 1964 there was a championship change, and there you go. That was it. Notice it's a Tuesday night of all nights, wrestling on a Tuesday night. Mad Dog Vachon defeated Vern Gagne this particular night in Minneapolis to start the official reign of the dog as the AWA World Heavyweight Champion. And you notice the dog even had an E on the end of his name back then. Somewhere along the way, the E fell out or fell off. But officially, Vern and the dog were the two champions in 1964. Dog carried it into 65.
Well, I think they took the E off of Vern's name and put it on the end of Vachon, because there were times where Vern was spelled Vern.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was,
So I think so not only do you win the AWA title, you also win the E at the end of the name.
Yeah. And also, I think it was a cost-saving measure. If they were going to be printing the program out, if they could save an E here or there, a Z and X, just don't put them on there. Printing costs.
I get that. Yeah, I can understand. Pay by the letter.
There we go.
Okay, so how about the tag champs of 64?
The tag champions of 1964. Let's take a look at. There they are. And Joe, I know you love these old pictures of Crusher and Dick the Bruiser. They were the tag team champions going into 1964. They were heels at the time. Let's not forget that. Crusher and Bruiser were notorious heels until late 1964, and then into 65 and beyond in the AWA. There was a brief title change with the Crusher and the Bruiser. We already put Vern's picture up, but this man, Moose Evans, and I've talked about Moose before. He kind of was a flash in the pan here in the AWA. He had a pretty decent run main eventing, but he's one of these guys that just fell completely off the planet when he got out of the wrestling business. Moose Evans and Vern Gagne defeated the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser for a very, very brief couple of week tag team championship change. But then the C and the B squad came back to regain the championship, and they held it until January of 1965.
So when Vern won the tag team championship, I'm just guessing that was during a time where he did not have the heavyweight championship, right?
He actually did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and usually in a case like that, the storyline back then was, well, you can't hold two championships. You got to decide on one. Not the days of, somebody owning 17 different championships in the same association. But no, Vern, the championship change with Moose Evans as his partner was the early part of the year. Vern still had the title and then lost it back real quickly, which enabled the storyline with Mad Dog Vachon pursuing Vern Gagne to pick up steam.
So I want to point out something to our viewers / listeners. In 1964, when Mad Dog won the championship, only in Omaha, there was no internet.
Right.
There was the local newspaper. Professional wrestling really wasn't covered on national news. There was no ESPN. I don't even know if there were rag sheets yet back in 1964.
Nope.
So you combine that with the modes of travel, forget about airplanes, even the roads, was there a road to Omaha? Of course there was. Was it an interstate highway, a 4 or 6 or 8 lane super highway back at the time? Probably not. Probably a 2-lane road. So what happened in Town A wasn't necessarily going to be conveyed in Town B, C, D, and all the way to Z. So it was a lot easier to be able to do things like that.
Absolutely. What a great point, Joe. And, it's an era of kayfabe too. But I've said on this program before, unless it showed up in the Minneapolis paper that there was a championship change in Denver or Omaha, it didn't happen. It happened for the people in Denver or Omaha, but we would not find out about it. So, yeah, the age of the internet, of course, we know what it's done to pro wrestling, and its fan base, what have you. But yeah, great point. Unless you were really into the business or astute or had a correspondent in Omaha, you did not know. And those changes were so fast that they could get away with it. It was just an interim storyline change.
Well, even if you had a correspondent in Omaha and you lived in Minneapolis, the only way you're going to be able to converse with them was by telephone.
Yep.
There was no email. I'll add that to it. And if you're going to drop a letter, by the time it got delivered from Omaha to Minneapolis, the title would have been changed back already.
Changed back already. Absolutely. Pony Express.
Exactly.
No.
So I got to ask about one other possible champion. Were the ladies given any love in 1964?
Minimal. And again, I talked about how the AWA Ladies Championship was such a non-entity. If they wanted to bill somebody as a champion, they did. A lot of times the champion was not on a show, or the alleged champion. As I'm looking at the AWA title history, and I don't know how accurate this is, I'm sure Shire will bring it to my attention, but Kay Noble apparently had an 8-year championship run. Yes.
Wow.
As the AWA Ladies Champion. Whenever Kay would appear on television, they billed her as the recognized Ladies Champion of the world. I'm not even sure that they referred to it as the recognized AWA Ladies Champion. But Kay was the champion throughout the 1960s and actually into about 1971, believe that. when she lost the title. And again, I don't know if this was officially to Vivian Vachon, but Kay Noble, one of the toughest of all time. She was the premier lady wrestler, 1964 AWA.
Chris, could you put that photo back up for a sec? I just want to ask Mick. So the attire of women's wrestling has evolved, shall we say.
Yeah.
Back in 1964, were there any controversies about women showing too much skin? I know stuff had started to change and so forth, but we're talking about 1964. We're closer to the 50s than the 70s.
Joe, if you look at pictures of women's wrestling from the 1960s, there's not a lot of difference in the attire. Rarely would you see a woman in a two-piece. A lot of them look very, very similar in the one piece. That was the way it was back then. Things had not changed very much. So again, it was kind of and I know specifically where ladies would, if somebody forgot their uniform or their wrestling togs, in a town, well, another lady wrestler would dig into her bag and pull out one. Hey, say you can wrestle or wear mine tonight. So yeah, it was definitely a different time. And what I would say, as far as the attire is concerned, it was women's wrestling itself that was having a hard time getting approved in some states. New York, for one. The Fabulous Moolah, I guess she was like the first to break through that barrier at Madison Square Garden. But that was a few years down the road. So very, very much in its infancy and simplicity, the women's wrestling scene.
Well, and in general, think about this. In 1964, women could not even get their own credit card or checkbook.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until the early 70s. That happened within my lifetime. So to allow women to wrestle, I don't agree with it. I understand it based on the times. That was unfortunately the mentality of that era.
Yep. Big change. Now they're headlining pay-per-views.
Big time. Love it. So I understand there are a couple of AWA wrestlers who passed in 1964.
Yeah, they might not be familiar names to wrestling fans in general. Chris, if we could put that picture up on the screen, that, believe it or not, that is Karl Krauser. That wasn't his real name as well, but he was wrestled as one half of the Kalmikoff brothers. That is Ivan and Karl Kalmikoff. That is Karl. He passed away, I believe it was from a heart attack in 1964, only 51 years old, something like that. Very, very surprising. And the other guy was heavy in the Chicagoland area and Detroit, and that was Larry Shane. And Larry was working for the AWA at the time. And he was part of the tour, part of the circuit, but he was killed in an auto accident in Illinois at just 35 years old. And Larry was Larry, and his real name, as it says here, is Arthur Beauchesne, just 35 years old, great, talented, typical babyface wrestler. But yeah, a couple of guys we lost in the business in 64.
Always sad.
Yeah.
So as I'm looking at our list, looks like we're going to do a little pop up the photo and we'll discuss them. We've got several of those. So Chris, whenever you are ready. Well, we know who that guy is, our good friend, Eddie Sharkey.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, these are people who were on the AWA roster. Some of them were regulars, some of them not so regular, but 1964, you had a couple of names that were kind of surprising. But Eddie Sharkey, and look at Eddie. Eddie apparently was still shaving his chest for publicity photos back then. So I'm guessing this picture of Eddie may be a little bit earlier than even 1964. But yeah, Eddie was a regular part of the AWA tour, usually as a mid-card guy. But Eddie was working the shows even way back then. Who do we got next?
Baby-faced.
Yep, babyface. And here's a guy, Mitsu Arakawa. And suit. And here in the AWA territory, he feuded with guys like the Crusher, even when Crusher was a heel, feuded with Vern Gagne, teamed up on occasion with Kenji Shibuya, and then eventually teamed up with Dr. Moto to become one half of the AWA Tag Team Champions a couple of years down the road. But Mitsu Arakawa, who was not legitimate Japanese, I don't know if Mitsu was of Filipino extraction or Hawaiian or what have you, but Mitsu was a great, great wrestler. And yes, Chris, the salt in the eyes was in the arsenal of Mitsu Arakawa. He won more than one match over the years by tossing the Morton into the eyes of his opponent.
I was just thinking, as you were mentioning, he's, Filipino, and it's just, man, just to have that. Okay, if you don't look like you're the Anglo-Saxon Caucasian, you know what? You're going to be Japanese. We're going to make you Japanese. And it's like, I understand why, but man, looking back at it now, number one, it's just so lazy and so racist. Oh, so racist. And they were doing that up until the 90s. Like, I don't think that really changed until maybe the mid 90s when you started to really, I think everybody started to get their respect for their true ethnicity.
Chris, I think, as I've said before, wrestling fans are still fighting World War II.
Yeah,
that has not ended yet. The Germans are still our hated rivals, and the Japanese, and Pearl Harbor happened just last week.
And all those damn Minnesota Russians too. Don't forget about those.
Oh yeah. But Mitsu Arakawa, great talent. One of the great pseudo Japanese wrestlers of all time.
Just trying to figure what other nationality could I pass for? Irish Joe? Spanish? No, couldn't be Spanish Joe.
Couldn't be Spanish Joe.
Swiss Joe? Norwegian Joe? No.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's Big Bill Miller. And Big Bill was still
Nordic Joe.
What was that?
Nordic Joe.
Nordic Joe.
Yes.
Well, pale enough. I could maybe pass for that. Anyway.
Nordic Joe. Big Bill Miller, who was mysterious Mr. M here in the early 1960s, AWA heavyweight champion of the world, trading the title with Vern Gagne. Big Bill, one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, 6'5", 6'6", close to 300 pounds, great collegiate wrestler in the state of Ohio, veterinarian by trade, and Dr. Bill Miller. And then they expanded it a little bit. They called him Dr. Big Bill Miller. And so I don't know if that was on his diploma in his vet's office or not, but Big Bill, the real deal, was still competing here into 1964.
I do have to point out, Mad Dog still has the E at the end of his name. Look at I'll live a king, Vachon.
Yeah. So he hadn't lost it yet, but that day was coming.
Well, at least I give Bill Miller the doctor moniker and didn't try to call him from, Nordic Bill Miller.
Yeah. And Bill Miller, again, I talked about this poor guy hit over the head by a 2x6 plank with a steel spike on the end of it. Ooh. The night that he lost the championship and was unmasked by Vern Gagne, Dr. Bill carried that scar with him for the rest of his life.
Who hit him with the board?
A fan.
Oh!
A fan hit him with a board as he was leaving the ring after he lost the title to Vern Gagne, got unmasked. The balcony hung pretty low so they could hit the guys if they wanted to. So Bill goes under the overhang of the auditorium balcony and clocked with a 2x6 plank with a 1/8 inch steel spike on the end of it.
Did they even have security back in 1964? I mean, you go to a wrestling match and you're walking in with a 2x4 with a stake in it, and people aren't going to wonder, what are you going to do with that?
Apparently not. And again, the fact that the balcony hung so low, usually if the baby faces would reach up and glad hand the fans. But not this guy. And I don't know if he ever got caught. I don't believe he did. I asked Bill when he was here, I think 1971 or so, I said, did they ever catch him? And he said, no, never got him. And he said, I remember I put my thumb into my head and felt my brain. That's how hard I got hit with that 2x6.
Wow.
Legendary Dr. Bill Miller.
As great as the olden days were, there's something to be said for learning from past stupidity. And you take a look at wrestler entrances now, and they're not, fans aren't like right there by your shoulder. You got a little bit of room. Big part of that is for their own safety as well.
Absolutely it is. Who's next?
Yep, bring it on. Who do we have next? Tubbs.
That guy there on the left, working over Vern Gagne with that shot to the short ribs. That, of course, is Larry Pretty Boy Hennig. And Larry started out as a babyface. We've mentioned this so many times. It was the old teacher turned on by the student. And Larry Hennig had actually turned heel, full-fledged heel in 1963. So needless to say, he and Vern were still going at it, both in singles and tag team action in 1964. Larry was long from being the axe, or ground transportation, as he referred to himself with his tag team with Kurt. That is Pretty Boy Larry Hennig.
Now, I don't know if the, shall we say, disdain or animosity between the two had begun by then, but I'm just guessing Larry was, if it was later on, Larry would have enjoyed this opportunity.
Oh, enjoyed. He would have thrown a party. I don't think the animosity had started till probably the late 60s. Then they started to have at it a little bit. And of course, Larry maintained that animosity till the day he died. So that was the real deal, in and out of the ring.
No doubt. Who's next, Tubbsy?
Look at him. Look at him. The suave debonair Frenchman. That would be Rene Goulet.
Oh, wow.
Bob Brodard. Rene Goulet, long before the years when he was kicked out of the French Foreign Legion. Apparently, he threw sand in the face of his commander or something. But Rene, of course, was French-Canadian. And at this point in his career, 1964, he had just come into the AWA about a year earlier. And he was full-throttle babyface. The ladies loved him, teamed up with Eddie Sharkey on occasion. And he, as well, was feuding with the Crusher, who was the #1 heel in the territory. But a great vintage shot of Rene Goulet. And you think of him later on, Joe, with that, that French Foreign Legion garb and the beard and the scraggly hair. Far cry from this Rene Goulet.
When that photo came up, I had absolutely no idea who that was.
Yep, there he is, Rene Goulet.
Wow. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Where are we?
Chris is getting the photos loaded. He's not getting loaded. These I know. One of my favorite names in tag team history, Murder Incorporated.
Tiny Mills and Stan Crusher Kowalski. And I looked, and again, the results in 64, they were still a tag team, but not that much. They didn't team up that often. Their heyday as a tag team was actually 50s into the early 1960s. And even in singles competition, Tiny appeared on a lot more shows, from what I could tell, than Stan did. My guess is that Stan might have been working in other territory. He was from Minneapolis. Tiny was lived in Malacca, Minnesota. But one of the greatest tag teams of all time, but more singles wrestlers doing independent work, as they say, in 1964. Not really, I don't want to say not main eventers, because they were, but they weren't in any kind of major storylines at that point.
I've got a question on Tiny Mills. Did his mirror only go from his chest to the top of his head, and he just forgot to shave below his chest line?
I think what happened there is Tiny's electric razor gave out about halfway down. So had Tiny worked from the bottom up, it may have been a little bit more acceptable. But yeah, something happened there. And you notice the physiques on Tiny and Stan. They weren't bodybuilders by any stretch of the imagination, especially Tiny Mills, but they were big, tough, no-nonsense guys, and that was emblematic of the wrestlers of the 1960s.
Yeah, I was going to say the bodybuilder type was very rare. I mean, today
That was Vince. That was when Vince caught the bodybuilder type. Did Joe freeze there? I believe he
Can you
did.
see me?
Where is he? There he is. He's back.
Hi, Sam.
All right.
I
I
don't
seen
know,
him. I
good or
seen him.
bad.
Who's next?
All right. There you go.
We've talked about this man many times. That is Reggie Parks. And Reggie, you talk about a fitness fanatic. This was the real deal. And I don't know how much they jimmied the weight of the automobiles that ran over Reggie's stomach as, part of a test of strength kind of thing. Reggie would lay down and let a Volkswagen bus drive across his stomach. I'm sure it was pretty well stripped down, but nonetheless, I wouldn't do it. Reggie Parks, tremendous baby face, came into the AWA in about 1964. They built him out of Melbourne, Australia. No, Reggie was Canadian. And then, of course, later on, after he got out of the wrestling business, he started making championship belts with the best of them, probably the king of the championship belts. And yes, this Reggie Parks, I don't know if I mentioned or not, he wrestled as the Avenger, the Masked Avenger at some point. I don't think it was Omaha.
Are you
George,
sure? I mean, was it maybe Minneapolis?
I don't know. I'll have to check with the source authority, and get back to you on that one.
Maybe it was Bloomington. I don't know.
Could be Golden Valley, New Hope. Could be.
Possibly Plymouth, Rosemont,
Melbourne?
Apple Valley, Hopkins, Roseville, Little Canada, Maple Grove.
Next.
can
Maybe
your
what?
voice get any higher? Moving on.
Oh, Lord, yes. Next wrestler. There he is. That is Doug Gilbert. And, early picture of Doug. And Doug actually teamed up with Reggie. They were Midwest Tag Team Champions out of the Omaha area. I want to say 1967. Doug was wrestling here as early as 1962. He was one of the first high flyers, to do the springboard off the turnbuckle, and great babyface talent. Had a series of matches with Mr. M, Bill Miller. He was in the main event mix quite a bit. Was Doug Gilbert, and eventually, of course, he put on a lot of weight. Became Doug the Pro Gilbert. In the southern part of the United States, also put on a mask as the Masked Professional, and he was the referee, the infamous referee that Vern Gagne threatened to fire right in the middle of Vern's retirement match with Nick Bockwinkel because Doug was daydreaming and didn't see Vern being choked out right in front of him by Nick Bockwinkel.
So Gilbert was also part of the tag team, Mr. High and Mr. Low, wasn't he?
That is correct.
When did that tag team form?
Say again?
When did that tag team?
That tag team formed in 1962, I believe. That was Dick Steinberg and Doug Gilbert. Again, former AWA tag team champions. Thank you for reminding me about that. They held the title for a very short time and lost it to the aforementioned Kalmakoff brothers. Doug Gilbert, a tremendous talent, great all-around worker, one of the unsung veteran heroes of the business.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next one.
The guy standing up there, that is old Vernsky. He's got a little bit of hair on his head. The gentleman that he is putting in that surfboard is Hans Schmidt. And Hans's better days, actually in the AWA territory, were early on in the 1960s and also the 1950s. Hans didn't wrestle here a lot in 1964, but Vern Gagne would always say that his toughest opponent was Hans Schmidt. Now, I don't know how much of that was a shoot, how much of it was a work. Hans has that definite Claudio Castagnoli Cesaro look about him. But Hans Schmidt, again, this is a hated German from Canada.
He was a pretty big guy, wasn't he?
He was lanky, and he was really cut. He was really put together. I mean, he's one of the, when he came back here, I want to say early 1970s. And by that point, it was not the same Hans Schmidt. I mean, he had completely shaved his head. He had bruises and bumps all over his body. His career had definitely taken a toll, kind of like it did with Superstar Graham when he came back with that horrid karate gimmick. But Vern Gagne, again, he said Hans Schmidt was the toughest guy that he ever wrestled, and that's saying something.
Yeah. What's next, Tubbsy?
There's a guy that ought to be familiar to you, Joe. You showed me a picture of him before we went on the air. That is Sailor Art Thomas. Art out of Madison, Wisconsin. He was one of the early top babyface black stars in professional wrestling. Tremendously popular, especially when he would wrestle in Milwaukee. Art worked until probably, I want to say, the mid-1970s. He actually was one of the opponents that Nick Bockwinkel defeated on his ascent to the AWA Championship back in 1971. A great guy in and out of the ring. And when they would bring Art in to the Twin Cities, he got a pop. Very, very popular guy. And again, no enhancement here, by the way. This is the Art Thomas. No steroids, no gimmicks. This was how this guy was put together.
We've seen in interviews some racial overtones back in the days. During promos, were there any racial overtones towards the black wrestlers?
There were veiled overtones, not so much in the AWA as there were certainly in the Deep South.
Sure.
That was, you had your tailor-made audience for that. The only one that I remember really with a racial overtone like that outside of Colonel De Beers later on was Pat Patterson. Pat was talking about Rufus R. Jones in one of his interviews, and he said, Rufus Jones, you're in trouble. Wait a minute, let me rephrase that for you so you can understand it. You is in trouble, boy. And he got away with it. So, yeah, but not very much in the AWA.
Yeah, and that's coming from Pat, who was gay.
Yeah, interesting. There you go.
Okay, next.
This guy right here. I think you might recognize him, Joe. One of the greatest wrestlers on God's green earth. That would be the late, incomparable Harley Race. And Harley, this is early on. Harley and Larry Hennig, of course, legendary as AWA Tag Team Champions. Harley, of course, then went on to singles fame as the NWA champion. Larry and Harley did not actually team up until about the fall of 1964. Harley had been in before as an enhancement guy. And all of a sudden, the promoter, whoever it was, Wally or Vern at the time, decided, let's put Larry Hennig and Harley Race together and see what we can do with this tag team. And they became legendary. When you talk about the greats of all time, if Harley Race is not on your list, you're full of shit, period. And this is, again, early shot of Harley, 1963, 64-ish, Harley Race.
We're showing him in 63, 64. You talked about Race Hennig, but was Harley, did he really wrestle up here quite a bit, or was it here and there, even when he was a tag team with Larry?
Once he came into the AWA, it was about a 3-year consecutive run for Harley. Primarily as a tag team, but they would split them up. Larry would wrestle one guy of the whoever they were feuding with at the time. Harley would wrestle the other guy. But yeah, it was pretty consistent once Harley got here. And of course, there was that brief time in 1965 when he was stabbed at a Minneapolis restaurant and had to take a very short amount of time off, which is typical of Harley Race. This guy was, it's like a fly going through a windshield and coming back to talk about it. That was the life of Harley Race. One of the greats of all time, big time stuff in 64.
Okay. What do we have next, Chris? Huh?
Wait, no, Chris, I think
Yeah?
you got no. You've got the wrong Moose.
Huh?
I know that you're a busy guy. You got twin season coming up and everything, but you might have made a mistake
Hold on.
pulling this one up. That is no, it's not Bullwinkle.
Is that Nick Bullwinkle?
Nick Bullwinkle, Jerkwinkle, Hoodwinkle. You want to get the
Is that
there he-
that better?
that's well, I don't know if it's better, but there he is. That
Okay.
is Big Moose Cholak, and Moose was wrestling here. You can see the similarity. You know, they could be related.
The horns are a little bit lower on this one than on the previous. Well, yeah.
Moose Cholak, big time favorite in the Chicago area. Moose owned a restaurant, a nightclub, I believe, in Chicago. So everybody knew Moose, Edward Moose Cholak. They knew him in Chicago and into the Indianapolis area. Great veteran. We've seen photos of where Moose goes into the ring wearing that full-sized moose head on his head. We still can't figure out how he got the antlers into the ring. But Moose Cholak came in 1964, and his immediate feud was with Reggie Parks. And Moose's finishing hold was the El Squasho. And needless to say, it was just jumping off the ropes and giving a guy a big splash. Very simplistic back in the day, but Moose was a solid heel here in the AWA.
With a big ass moose head that weighed a lot.
Oh.
I mean, it was a legitimate moose head.
Yeah, I mean, Boris Zukov has look at the size of a man's head.
Yeah.
Or Boris has a head, but I mean, he didn't have antlers that I could see.
Okay,
All
what's
right.
next, Tubbs?
Oh, I love this. The guy that we're going to focus on is on your left, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Angelo Poffo. And to your right, that is a guy by the name of Randy Poffo.
Wow.
Macho Man Randy Savage back in the day, obviously as a teenager. Angelo Poffo competed here in the AWA area. He would pop in and out. He was more on, kind of a Denver guy, maybe Omaha would show up on those shows. But in the late 60s, he teamed up with Chris Markoff, and they were part of the Devil's Duo in the Annapolis and Chicago area, managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. So there you have Angelo Poffo and the future Macho Man Randy Savage.
Wow.
Great picture.
Randy filled out a little bit.
A little bit. And this guy here, the guy that Crusher called Oil Can Harry. That would be early Jack Lanza, John Lanzo, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, by way of Laredo, Texas, by way of Santa Fe, New Mexico, by way of Albuquerque. And, I know in the 70s, Jack was still living in West Bloomington. I think he lived there for a long time. But that's your clean cut Jack Lanza. The Blackjack character managed by Bobby Heenan was not for a few years yet. Jack was a mid-card guy. Matter of fact, he would curtain jerk some of the shows. Tremendous babyface talent, got over with the crowd. He had the cowboy hat and the cowboy boots as opposed to the regular wrestling boots. Jack was a big-time player for the AWA, of course, going on into the 1980s.
Wow. Okay, we've got a few more here. What do we have next, Chris?
Talked about this man many times, Wilbur Snyder. Wilbur was from the 1950s on, from the 50s at least to the mid-1960s. Wilbur was a main event guy here in the state of Minnesota and the AWA. Former United States champion. I believe Wilbur was even maybe recognized as a world champion in some territories. When he first came in, they billed him as one of the only men to ever pin Vern Gagne cleanly in the middle of the ring. Wilbur was your consummate babyface. Last time we saw him was the last AWA show at the Minneapolis Auditorium in 1988. Wilbur came in as a guest, as a legend guest. And the interesting thing about Wilbur Snyder, he teamed up with Reggie Parks and Vern Gagne at the end of 1964 in a 6-man tag match against Larry Hennig, Harley Race, and Dick the Bruiser.
Oh, wow.
There was a falling out with Dick the Bruiser, Hennig, and Race. Dick walked out on the match, allowed the baby faces to win. Boom. All of a sudden, Dick the Bruiser and the returning Crusher, a month later, were now full-fledged baby faces in the Twin Cities. So Wilbur, on a couple of counts, he's got his name etched in history in the annals of the AWA.
I never knew how Crusher and Bruiser turned babyface until now. Thank you for that.
There you go. Yes, sir.
Okay, what's next, Chris?
Oh, my. The guy on your right throwing the drop kick is Pat O'Connor. Not the first AWA heavyweight champion, despite what you might have heard. Look at that drop kick. I mean, first of all, the photographer had to be spot on. This is not AI, ladies and gentlemen. That's a legitimate drop kick to the jaw. Pat O'Connor, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, was still coming in and out of the AWA into the 1960s. He actually came back early to mid 1970s. He wrestled Nick Bockwinkel at the St. Paul Auditorium. Nick went over, but O'Connor had lost so much by then. He just wasn't even the same guy. As I said, former NWA champion, huge in St. Louis, and his match with Buddy Rogers in Chicago in 1961, when Rogers won the NWA championship, drew a massive crowd at Comiskey Park in Chicago. So Pat's certainly a part of both NWA and AWA history.
And who is that getting potatoed?
You know, I'm not sure. It kind of looks like you when they scrape you up off the floor at the Croatian Hall at the end of the night. I think.
What's the Croatian Hall?
I think more than one person has stepped on your face on the way out of the Croatian Hall.
Well, that's why they call you Croatian Joe.
I'm a world traveler, I guess. So
another $1 million T-shirt idea right there, Croatian Joe. All right, we got a couple more.
I think we do.
Dale Lewis, a tremendous amateur wrestler, and if you don't recognize Dale Lewis as being in the AWA, he was in fact 1964 into a couple of years into the 60s here in the AWA. Preliminary guy, I think he got a main event once or twice. Dale's claim to fame, besides his amateur wrestling background, was the fact that he turned heel, became Professor Dale Lewis, as a nasty bad guy, arrogant, called him the Professor because of his immense wrestling skill. But that was not here in the AWA. That was down south. But Dale Lewis, a gifted wrestler, right up there with Danny Hodge, Vern Gagne, and some of the all-time great amateur wrestlers. Dale, bit player here in the AWA.
Yeah, I think we got a couple more. Now, I think, let me guess, I think I know who, that's got to be Fritz von Erich.
That is Fritz von Erich. Jack Atkinson early on. And look at him. I don't know how old he is there, guys, but look at the physique. I mean, but there's no mistaking that is Fritz von Erich. And, of course, wrestling fans, astute fans, historians will know that Fritz von Erich was, in fact, for a short time, AWA World Heavyweight Champion in the Omaha area. He defeated Vern Gagne, but Fritz, again, real quick, boom, 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 cup of coffee as the champion in Omaha. Fritz von Erich, definitely an AWA star. More so was his brother, or his kayfabe brother, Waldo von Erich, who wrestled here in the 1960s as well. But yeah, Fritz, another guy, like we've said so many times, those interim title changes in Omaha that didn't stick.
Oh, and I think we've got one more.
I want to tell you about this guy. And I know, Joe, you saw him in probably one of the greatest matches of all time at Wrestle Rock when he got into the ring with Giant Baba.
Huh.
That would be Bill Green in the AWA, Bob Brown in other territories. And as I'm looking over the results the other night, and I see him come up, he was wrestling as Bill Green here in the state of Minnesota for AWA TV. At the same time, he was wrestling as Bob Brown in the Omaha area. Same promotion, same company. But apparently, the farther north he got, the greener he got. Bill Green, Bob Brown, Bob Pink, Bill Chartreuse, whatever you want to say, the Bulldog, legendary in the business. There you go.
You got to love professional wrestling. I mean, just a Philippine guy booked as a Japanese wrestler, Bob Brown having 3 different names, Fritz von Erich, real name Jack Atkinson.
Yeah.
It's just part of the charm of the business.
It's a weird, goofy, carny business that we all love.
Yep.
Oh, we do. But I figured I'd finish on a high note there with Bulldog, Bob Brown, green, purple, whatever.
Yeah, it's like Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. His name is brown and purple and red and blue and green and yellow and red.
And by the way, with all those colors, Bob Brown, Bill Green never really amounted to anything beyond an enhancement talent here in the upper Midwest in the AWA. Tag team champion in Omaha, wrestled Bruiser Brody in Winnipeg, but not here. He was Minneapolis TV jobber. There you go.
Well, let's get to some shout outs and then we will take it home.
All right, let me bring up the shout outs. And Jason Biaggi, Doug Frazee, and Brad Breitzman. And Chris, you know why I mentioned those guys.
I do, yes.
Let me throw in Brian Gardner as well. And I think we neglected to mention Brian. They came along with us for a big time lunch.
And Lenise.
We were, oh yeah, well, of course you.
And Lenise
Hennig. Big time lunch at Pizza Luce in Hopkins, Minnesota, where in fact Chris almost choked to death.
I didn't choke. I didn't choke. The waitress asked me for my order and she knew that I had just taken a bite of food and I didn't want to waste your time. So I was nice and I made my order while I was chewing. I thought I was multitasking. I was trying to be efficient with my time.
Let me back up here. A bite of food. A bite.
A bite.
You had a shovel. You put the shovel in the artichoke dip or whatever it was, and I mean, you were laying on your back siphoning everything into your mouth.
The shovel was the bread. The bread was the shovel. The artichoke dip was the snow. It's like, look how grass I got it. Yeah, it was good.
I'm sorry, Joe. I really am.
You really missed something, Joe.
Well, I didn't know that I had an invite, but I'm glad that you had some food. Apparently, almost too much at one time, but I'm not going to knock that because I've been accused of eating too fast and putting too much food in my mouth at one time as well by my family. But anyway, my shout out, not a blind dart throw. It goes to Jay Lurbs. I've known Jay for, probably about 3 decades. And every time I see him, the conversation inevitably goes back to the AWA. And he recently joined my Polish Joe AWA Memories page on Facebook. And so the shout out is to you, Jay.
And mine's going to go to Craig Stringfellow. His father was our shout out last week. One thing that I like about Craig is we talk about our pinfall membership, which we're going to be adding a few more things to, you guys. I think you're really going to like it. He gifted his father a pinfall membership. And so we have people that are giving out pinfall memberships to family members. So thank you, Craig, for supporting the program, the pinfall, and for your dad as well. So you should have something in the mail if you have not received it yet. It should be coming momentarily because we're filming this on Thursday, and this is on Tuesday that this is dropping. So you should have that. If not, but yeah, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that, and thank you guys.
Want to reiterate, and I know this is sentiment that we all feel, we don't thank the folks enough. I mean, not only people who are tuning in, on YouTube, but especially the pinfall members.
Mm-hmm.
It does not go unnoticed. Once we send you the package and everything else, you are not forgotten. You are such an integral part of what we do, and we really appreciate all of you.
Yeah, whether you are a pinfall member or just watch us, the number of people that follow us on Facebook and throw messages out. We're talking about an organization that has been extinct really for 35 years.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to the impact that the AWA had, not only in Minnesota, not only in the Twin Cities, not only in the upper Midwest, but really we've got followers from all over the world, mainly in the US.
Yes, we do. I took a look at the demographics. I mean, you would not believe it's not only just North America, but I mean, yeah, we've got Europe and we've got Australia, and it's really amazing to see where people are following and listening and watching this program from. To think that we're based here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, but just where people all over are watching us. It's really gratifying when you see all of the demographics and all of the analytics.
We have a great crew.
We do.
We may have a niche market, so to speak, but I tell you what, we've got some loyal people that they watch every show. They correct us if we make a mistake. They pump us up if we need pumping up. We got a great fan base for this podcast.
And the great part about all of those people from around the world, where they're billed from is where they're actually from. Unique.
I didn't see Parts Unknown, though. I'm going to have to go back and look because I bet we've got people from Parts Unknown.
Many.
Mm-hmm.
And we should.